We don't need more financial information. We need financial wisdom to help us redefine our relationship to money and to create lives in alignment with our deepest values. Well, that's according to my guest today, financial well-being guru Manisha Thakor. Now, she suggests that in today's fast-paced, status-conscious world, it's all too easy to get sucked into a never-enough mindset. And I agree with her. So in our chat, you'll hear how Manisha candidly shares about her own toxic behaviours around money, about work, how she successfully destroyed relationships, health, and her sense of self-worth. And then Manisha's going to reveal how she and many others have actually overcome this never-ending mindset of it's never enough, and how you could feel the ability to free yourself too. So wherever you are in your wealth journey, I'm sure you're going to get some benefit from my chat with Manisha. So let's dive into it.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
My guest today is financial well-being guru, Manisha Thakor. Now, Manisha is a Harvard Business School graduate, of chartered financial analyst, a certified financial planner, and an acclaimed author whose work's been empowering women and families to achieve financial well-being for over 25 years. But she's not just an expert on money management. Manisha's holistic approach has actually helped her own personal journey and her professional expertise. And I know these are actually bold statements to make, so I'm really looking forward to having a chat. So welcome, Manisha.
Oh, Michael, thank you so much for having me.
Now, first of all, congratulations on your new book, The Secret to Finding Enough. And I'd like to ask you a few questions about that in a moment. But there's so many people out there telling us how to, let's say, do money. One has to really be careful who we listen to. So tell us a bit about yourself, about your journey, and why you're even qualified to give us advice about money.
Michael, I love that you asked that question, because one of the things I always tell people, when someone is talking money to you, you want to know what their background is. So I've worked in financial services for 30 years. I spent the first 15 years on the institutional side of the business, where I was a buy-side equity analyst and portfolio manager, managing money for endowments, foundations, corporations, pension plans. And then, as life would have it, I had an interesting twist. A girlfriend of mine from Harvard Business School said to me, you know what? I'm getting a lot of questions from my female friends who went into operations or strategy or consulting about basic money questions. Are you? And I said, yes. She said, let's write a book about it. So we wrote 2 books, and then that started the second half of my career. So the last 15 years, I have worked on the retailer individual side of the business, helping individuals.
Right. Now, you've called your book, and I've had a look at your website, you talked a bit about money zen. Why did you decide to call that concept that and your book that?
So the title Money Zen comes from the sense that I have had throughout my entire career that most people have very little zen about their money. And oftentimes it's psychological, sometimes even more so than it is practical or factual. And so I wanted a book that had a title that did not imply that this was a book about the nuts and bolts of personal finance. I've already written 2 books that do that. I wanted a book that had a title that gave readers a sense that we were going to go into an area that touched onto the psychology and some of the feelings and some of the cultural and social expectations that can lead us to feel zen or not feel zen about our money.
Well, I'm very much into the psychology of money as well, something I learned along my journey, that there's a lot more to wealth than money. There's a lot more to success than money. But even to become financially wealthy or to become rich, there's a lot of psychology behind it. Now, currently in Australia, and I bet it's much the same in the United States where you are, we're chasing our tails. Everyone seems to be running harder just to be in the same place. Inflation's hitting us. Interest rates are going up. The cost of living's going up. Wages are not going up as much, but people are still wanting more. There's a lot of still discretionary spending happening in Australia, which is annoying our Reserve Bank, the equivalent of your Fed. We're out there buying. There seems to be a sense, a mindset of never enough. And you've mentioned that in your writings, and you actually likened it to a cult. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so there is a growing sense. I am half Indian by heritage. My father's from India. So what I've noticed on a global basis is that increasingly all 8.5 billion of us seem to be getting these messages that the answer to almost anything that ails us is more stuff, more income, more wealth, more obligations, more success. And it's become such a mantra, if you will, that we don't often even stop to question it in the same way that cult members don't even stop to question what is this, quote, religion that I'm following? And, the religion of more-ism, you might say, or never enough-ism, I worry is becoming cult-like.
So how do you know if you've fallen prey to this, okay, let's call it cult, of never enough?
I would say if you have found yourself feeling at points that no matter how hard you are working, no matter how much more you earn, how many promotions you get, how many accolades you receive, how much more you are able to do or acquire for yourself or your family, or even in terms of how much you're able to give charitably, it's never enough. You have that feeling, it's never enough. That's the sign. And it's, one example I give is when people ask, well, how are you doing? Years ago, we used to answer with rather banal statements. Enjoying the weather. Isn't the sunshine beautiful? But now the general answer is busy. And then sometimes it's really busy. And then sometimes it's crazy busy. And those are all signs that you're part of this cult of never enough. And we take those answers to be completely normal. And in fact, I call it a busy badge. We almost take pride in that. So that would be another signal that you've fallen prey without even realizing it to this cult-like mentality.
Well, at our high-end workshop wealth retreat where we get together with very successful business people and entrepreneurs, most of them, despite being successful, still have this underlying theme that I've got to work hard. I've got to work hard for my money. And for others, it's actually, I'm not good enough. So there's that self-talk of, I've got to strive for more. At what point did you realize that your own attitudes to work and to money had started to become problematic?
For me, it took several headbangs, not just a divorce, not just nearly dying twice, not just losing pretty much all of my friends and having no hobbies. The real inflection point for me was as I was turning 50, I was sitting in a client meeting and we were running some Monte Carlo analyses, and the client was very private, very high net worth. She didn't want to share her numbers. So in the spirit of transparency, we ran the analyses on my portfolio. And I knew the numbers. I run them 6 ways to Sunday. But we're running the analysis and we're stress testing. And we're saying, if inflation rises to this and, my returns compress to that and my spending quadrupled, at what age am I going to run out of money? And, we are pushing this to the envelope and, I'm hitting 110 and I'm still not running out of money. And I just started crying, realizing, what am I chasing after? I have enough, but why do I not? Why do I feel that I do not have enough and that I am not enough? And that's what got me started on the journey.
Well, that's a fascinating story. So you personally achieved this level of financial safety, but it sounds like only after decades of pushing yourself, pushing past your limits, sustaining, as you said, some huge blows to your physical and mental health. But is this evolution to, let's call it money zen, a comfortable place, achievable for somebody who hasn't got such a big asset base or as the same means you had?
So this question brings up what should we be striving for? Is the answer to strive for financial wealth, or is it that we should be striving for financial health? And I would argue that there's two parts to that question. That's the first layer. And then the second layer is, what is it that is driving you? And we can talk about them separately, but the first piece is, just like we keep seeking more, often in possessions and status and likes and social media and all of these sorts of things, oftentimes we seek more money than we actually need to be happy, because we have more stuff and now we have to spend more money to take care of our stuff, and then we have to spend more money to insure our stuff and spend more of our irreplaceable time to take care of or shop or cart around our stuff. And so what I find is oftentimes some of the happiest people I meet are the people living some of the simplest lives, some by choice, and those are the ones that certainly are the happiest. Others, because their income and their chosen profession has not afforded them the opportunity, they have been forced to choose one of two mindsets. And those that have chosen a mindset of, I'm going to maintain financial health and understand what the steps are to do that so I don't go into debt and live within my means, can actually find a very strong sense of money zen and wealth, a rich life.
So, Manisha, do you think that certain people are more susceptible to become workaholics? It seems we've developed a nation of workaholics.
I definitely think so. And I think workaholism is often very misunderstood. I think on the surface, people can look at someone who is a workaholic and think, oh, you're greedy. You just want more money. You're after power. And you said something earlier, Michael, and it's really true. Many successful, driven people are driven by something inside them that feels like a lack. And in fact, there have been a variety of different studies that have shown this, but oftentimes it is small t traumas, things that happen to us before age 25 when our brains are fully developed. It could be something like being teased or bullied at school, which was what happened in my case. This sort of thing drives you to then find a sense of self and belonging in some place that can't hurt you. And work often is a great substitution for that. And so, that is one, I think, dramatically under-discussed cause of workaholism. But there are others.
Oh, yes, there are. So anyone listening to this who's feeling that they're not good enough or they're not smart enough or that they need to have more should just understand that there's lots of other people out there feeling the same. But while some are feeling burned out by this, I know there's others who'd argue, hey, I love my job. So what's the difference between a healthy work engagement and, let's call it, work addiction?
Right. It's such a fine line. And it comes down to what is driving your behavior. So when you feel internally compelled, like you can't stop, you want to stop, but you can't stop. You get to a point where your child may have an important engagement, but you want to leave your desk, but you can't. That's when you're in workaholism mode, as opposed to when you just love your work so much. You enjoy thinking about it. It brings you energy. It's a source of fulfillment. But if you need to set it aside because there are other priorities that come up, you can comfortably make that trade-off.
Now, we've spoken a little bit about how we feel about ourselves and about money, and a lot of this actually happened as a child, things you heard, things you saw, things you experienced. And at that stage, you made your decisions based on, well, how you could think as a child. But as an adult, we tend to still play out the same patterns in our mind and in our life. We tend to become very similar to one or both of our parents. How can we overcome this mindset that our self-worth depends upon our net worth? We're trying to prove ourselves to somebody.
It is a really introspective type of exercise, and I think that there's a desire in modern society to want to take a pill or flip a switch or have some, quick answer to it. But unfortunately, it requires self-reflection, oftentimes some very painful introspection, some forgiveness of others, a lot of times some forgiveness and compassion and kindness to yourself. And then most importantly, a building up of a reservoir of other actions and activities that you associate with your identity, almost a crowding out effect. So that, for the longest time, I literally thought I was my net worth. I felt like there was a number painted on my forehead, and that was my value. And when it went up, I was more important. And when it went down, I was less important as a human. And I had nothing else that I valued myself on. And, now today I can see I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an aunt, I'm a piano player, I'm a paddle boarder, I'm a very bad cook, but I like to eat. There are many things that I can identify with.
Sure. So I think the first bit is to help you recognize that this is going on at a subconscious level. And that's why I love having chats with people like you on this podcast. That's why you've written your book, and we'll go into that a little bit to just help educate people, as I've written our various books, including Rich Habits, Poor Habits. So really, these discussions are just to open the conversation. And you've written a book, which maybe we should have just a quick talk about now, and then there's a few more questions I'd like to ask you. But how is your new book going to help readers overcome these challenges?
So what I want to help people do is create a new mental model of success. And for people like me, and I might imagine many of your listeners, because those of us that are hard charging, we like finance, we like investing, we like building wealth, many of us have a mindset around equating at least a portion of our self-worth with our net worth. And what I want to help people do is to flip that around and think about optimizing your life, not for those two factors, but for these factors: emotional wealth and financial health. And for some people, they need to focus on financial health first, and then they can build up the emotional wealth. I imagine many of your listeners are in a position where they have financial health, and there's a lot of extra priceless time that could be spent building out that emotional wealth. But the scale, the balance of how much time and energy you want to focus on either of those factors is unique. It's up to each individual person. There's not a right or wrong answer. But identifying those two anchors as the focal points for our macro and micro decisions during the day. And as we're setting our bigger business and capital expenditure plans, thinking about them in terms of financial health and emotional wealth, that's a game changer. And that's what I want to teach people to do.
Well, I'll leave a link to where we can get your book, The Secrets of Finding Enough, in the show notes. Now, we know that there's a lot happening in the outside world and society that's creating these issues. Other biological, internal things that are making some people more susceptible than others to this notion of not having enough.
Absolutely. So one example is, if you were to think back, I guess these days we'd probably have to go back about 200 years. And you could plunk most of us in a wilderness situation. And if we were with a group of 5 or so folks of different ages, we could probably figure out how to eat, create some sort of shelter, stay warm. And you do that today, we don't know what to do. We need money in order to provide food, shelter, safety. And so our amygdala, which is, an age-old portion of our brain, trained to go off when we are in danger of not having food, shelter, and safety, we no longer know how to satisfy our amygdala through our own skills. We can only satisfy it, most of us, through money. So, there's an evolutionary reason in modern society that's pushing all of us towards this quixotic relationship with money.
Wanting more. Yeah.
Right. It quite literally is our source of survival. But then there's another element to it as well. When you think about, again, if we go back 200 years and we imagine those of us living on the land in community with each other, having different skills that we use and share to create our economy and our livelihoods and to provide for ourselves and families. But we went with the seasons, and there were certain seasons of feast and certain seasons of famine. And there were certain times of the year you could get blueberries and some times of the year where you couldn't get blueberries. Well, now we live in a world where it's feast all the time. You can always get blueberries. And so what happens is our minds, our brains are hardwired during the feast periods to gorge, to want more, to get as much as we can because there will be a famine. But now there's no off switch because there's just always plenty. And so that's another, when you speak to evolutionary biologists who are trying to understand, literally scientifically, why humans do and behave the way they do. These are two really big factors. Once you say them, it seems common sense. But until I spoke with evolutionary biologists, this never occurred to me. And now I can see it regularly in real life.
Sure. Now, there's a number of other factors, I guess, that are exacerbating this: social media, Instagram, Facebook. You're seeing people's highlight reels. You're not actually seeing the bits on the cutting room floor, Manisha. How do these fictionalized lifestyles that we see in the media play into all this thing of, I just haven't got enough, they're better than me?
Oh, Michael, I'm so glad you asked me that. I think it's incredibly, incredibly damaging. I've always loved numbers, and I have started doing something over the last 7-10 years, which is watching just regular old TV shows, crime shows, fictional shows, crime shows, legal dramas, medical shows, and I'll take a look at a character. It might be a policeman, it might be a nurse, it might be a staff assistant, or it might be a lead physician or an engineer. And I will look at the car they're driving in the show, the house they live in, the types of clothes they're wearing, how they're socializing, and I do a back of the envelope calculation of how much they would have to earn pre-tax to live like that. And then I go take a look for the city where that show is purporting to be happening and take a look at the average incomes for those positions. Uniformly, when I do this, Michael, you would have to earn 30 to 50% more than what those jobs pay to live like we are seeing these people live in media. And so when we look at ourselves and we think like, well, I have that job. Why doesn't my house look like that? Well, that's why.
That's actually a very interesting thought. I hadn't looked at it that way. But as you were saying it, I was thinking of the shows we've been watching on Netflix and where the policemen live and where the nurses live. And you're right, unachievable on those incomes. I was thinking more initially when I asked the question about social media, but it shows up in lots of different ways. Now, I'm based in Melbourne where we were locked down for 260 days, not consecutive over COVID. I think it was the most lockdown part of the world. I know that various parts of the United States where you were had different levels of lockdown, but one of the side effects of COVID, and in some ways a good one, is the balance of working from home. Now, many people work hybrid jobs. Has this work from home trend helped alleviate the problem of overwork, or has it actually just simply exacerbated it because you got an extra couple of hours, you haven't got the travel time, you don't have fixed breaks, you don't have the water cooler type discussions? Not that anyone has water coolers anymore. What's the situation there?
You know, my unscientific numerical response would be it's kind of 70-30. I think for 70% of people, it's made it worse. And for 30% of people, it's made it better. And I just want to emphasize and state that's for those people who have the opportunity to work from home. I mean, there's a whole swath of folks that don't even have the choice. But the reason I say for 70% it's actually made it worse is people fall into two buckets. One is I notice in double income households with children, what's happening is juggling all of that noise and activity and the expectations of employers that you be always on has led stress levels to just go through the roof. There's a scheduling complexity that actually increased rather than decreased when you had firmer boundaries in the office, because you had to have more planning because you were commuting to work and so forth. There were more boundaries around your day. And then the second thing I've noticed is with those of us that tend to have a not always healthy relationship with work can basically just bleed into absolutely every crevice of your life. I can't tell you how many people I meet who I will talk to at 6, 7 p.m. and they'll be, telling me, hey, Manisha, you know what? I'm still in my pajamas. I've been working all day. I put on the work shirt, but the rest of my body is still in my pajamas and slippers because I've even left. And so I do worry that there's a little more bad than good.
Yep, I can see that. Definitely. One of the experiences I had during those times of COVID and the lockdowns was, even though I worked from home, I actually put on different clothes during the day. And at 5 o'clock, I actually changed into what we call a tracksuit. I think you call sweats there. I actually physically changed clothes, mentally went for a walk. I actually did something different just to separate the day, even though I only walked 2 minutes or 30 seconds to the next room to get to the next stage of my life. This has been a fascinating conversation, and it's opened a lot of thoughts in my mind. So how does one determine what enough is then? What are some of the questions people should be asking themselves in order to reevaluate their priorities around work and money?
I think the first place to start is with a really basic question, and that's, am I happy? It's a simple question, but most of us don't really ask ourselves that. And then the next question I would ask is, what is the next incremental step I could take right now that would bring me closer, that would make me more happy? That's probably a better way to say it, or make me happier. And get a sense of whether it has to do with more of something or less of something. Do you need more time with the people you love? Do you need less time in meetings that lack agendas and purpose? Or do you need more time in efficient meetings so that you can spend less time at work and more time binging on Netflix? And so it's having an awareness that at the center of your decision making is not productivity. The question you're not asking is, how can I be more productive? Have I done enough? What do I need to do next? The question you're starting with is, am I happy? And that shifts so much.
Manisha, people listening to this are going to be at various stages of their career. Some are still starting out. Some have got a big asset base. Some have just gone through a divorce. What advice would you have for people at different stages of their life and their financial career?
So there are a couple of things that I think when it comes to financial health and having a foundation to be able to experience emotional wealth throughout the entirety of your life are essential. The first is living within your means. And we've talked a little bit about some of the cultural factors that can force us to live out of our means. And we can talk a little more about some of the others: easy access to credit, lack of personal finance education, and so forth. But I think the first thing, especially for young people, when you come out of school, remember, the way your parents live now, it took them 30 years to live that way. And you don't get to live that way right out of school. You build up to that by living within your means at every stage in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And what does that mean? That means making sure that you are setting money aside, that you're saving, that you are investing, that if you're using debt, you're using it wisely for assets that appreciate, such as real estate, and that you are taking time to invest in your financial knowledge. That's what brings you financial health. And depending on your chosen profession and how interested you are in your finances, that health may end up turning into a body of wealth. But here's what's interesting. There's a stat that's quoted in the United States all the time. It's an old study, and it says that all you need to be happy is $75,000 of income a year, US dollars. And anything more than that doesn't increase your happiness. New research has come out of Princeton University and the University of Pennsylvania that has debunked that. And I think most of us had been looking at that number and thinking, okay, that's crazy. That the number was too low. But the reason that study and that number is wrong is not because it was too low. It's because if you have more money beyond meeting your absolute basics, but you lack a foundation of overall well-being, your life satisfaction will not increase with more money. That's why if you don't start with that question, am I happy? It doesn't matter how much more money you have. If you get more and more and more productive, but you're not happy, that money doesn't translate. And so that's what I want young people to understand as they're building their careers. You want to be financially healthy. Let that guide you. It may turn into wealth. It may, but it will always be health if that's what you focus on. And with that base layer, then you have the foundation to build emotional wealth. Then maybe you'll have financial wealth on top of that, depending on how you define financial wealth.
I think it's important to recognise that money is important in those areas where it's important, but it's not at all important in a whole lot of other areas of your life. And yet, as you say, too many people focus on the money side of things. So in my mind, to be truly wealthy, yes, you need money. I mean, any problem that money can solve isn't really a problem, but you need health. Boy, has the last couple of years shown that, and I know you personally have had some health issues over the past. You need somebody to love and somebody to love you, in my mind. You need to be able to keep learning and growing. For many people, spirituality is an important part of wealth. Contribution is, in my mind, as well. So I'd like to make it clear that while we've spent a lot of time talking about money today, I'm sure we both recognize the fact that while it's important in some parts of your life, it's definitely not important in many others.
Precisely. And that's why I like to separate financial health and emotional wealth, because people focus so often on the first part of that equation and don't understand that for most of us, I've had 2 near-death experiences, and it really is true. When you think you're on your deathbed, you really do not say, I wished I had worked more, and you really don't care how much you have in the bank at that moment. What you care about is having more time with your loved ones. That's what you care when you hit that moment. I still tear up I wish I could bottle that up and give it to people, that at the end of the day, quite literally, you come to see what makes for a rich life. And it is love, community, connection, caring, family, health. And yes, money does help. It helps you enjoy all of those things. But without those things,
what would you say to some people who are listening to this and say, oh, they've been around a while, they've been around the block a few times, they've built up an asset base, but we're now living in a different time, times of economic uncertainty, extra costs. Maybe we're going to fall into a recession. That's in the news the whole time. Even if we're not, my cost of living is going up. Is there still an ability to get financial security? How do I actually even achieve this money zen that Manisha is talking about?
Part of it, a big part of it, goes back to redefining and understanding what financial health looks like for you. And by that, I mean, so many people are living beyond their means. And what I've noticed, we're going through a spate of layoffs in the U.S. right now. Tech companies are laying people off left and right. And so I'm observing this firsthand, where some people are being laid off. And because the life that they've created is one in which it's everything that has come into their lives is very deliberate. They don't deny themselves things, but what they spend money on brings them joy. They're very careful not to leak money towards places that don't bring them joy, for example. And then there are people who are overextended, and when these types of things come out of the blue, they're blown sideways. And so, I look at 2 administrative assistants, both earning, let's say in US dollars, $50,000 a year, and they both get laid off. One can be fine and one can be very not fine. And I also would like to say that you can make 5 million US dollars a year and get laid off, and some will be fine. And some people at 5 million who spend, $6 million a year, which happens, are not fine. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people think that if only I had more money, I would be okay. That is true if you are not making a living wage. And in America, we don't have the social safety nets that I believe we should have. And so we have a lot of people that are not making a living wage, and they are working hard. But if you are making a living wage, then yes, I believe you can. And part of the reason a lot of people are struggling is not because they're greedy. It's because we don't have widespread personal finance education, and more people aren't listening to your show. More people aren't self-educating, and it's confusing.
It's a huge problem, the financial literacy, and that's why I know you've got a passion to help people, as do we. So at the beginning of this chat, I asked you, hey, tell us a bit about yourself and are you really qualified to give advice? I'm sure people who've been listening to us for the last 40 minutes or so have recognized that, yes, you definitely are. So I'm going to recommend that they get your book, The Secret of Finding Enough. Now, I have actually been given a pre-release look at that, and I've read it and I found it fascinating, but I'll leave a link in the show notes because I think people would get benefit from it as well. But just to finish off, what are the first steps anyone could take to start applying your advice now?
The purpose of this book is to help anybody who feels that no matter what they do, no matter how much more they earn, no matter how many more promotions or accolades, it's never enough. To help that they are never enough. It's to help a person who feels this never enough mindset, which I felt down to my toes, no matter how much success I had. The book has 2 steps. The first step is to understand how you came to have that feeling. And there are 4 core elements or areas that contribute to it. We talked about 2 of them, but there are 4 or 3 of them. There's your personal factors, there's cultural factors, societal factors, and evolutionary biological factors. And it's like a Rubik's Cube. So as you read through the book, you learn about the 4 different factors, and you start doing self-reflection and peeling back and understanding what has led to your feeling this compulsive never enough in whatever way it's manifesting for you. And then the second half of the book is all about the steps to take to identify and establish financial health and identify for yourself what is emotional wealth, what is it that makes you happy, and what are the next steps that you should be taking in order to move towards those things that make you happy. That's the framework. And the goal is when you come away from the book that you have at least 3 to 5 actionable things that you can do right away that you know are going to move you closer to having the life that makes your heart sing.
Well, I guess we do need more financial education, but I think what you're also telling us is we need more financial wisdom to help us redefine our relationship with money and actually create the sort of life that's going to be in alignment with our deepest values. It means that you are going to have to think about why you're doing things. Why do you want more? Why is it what you've got currently not enough? I hope you've opened the mind of our listeners. I know that you've made me think about things differently. So Manisha Thakor, thank you very much and all the best with your new book, The Secret to Finding Enough.
Michael, thank you so very much for having me on. It's been an honor.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Manisha. Now, if you got some benefit from it and you're not already a subscriber to the Michael Yardney podcast, just stop for a sec before we go on, and whatever podcast app you're on, just follow this show so that you're going to be able to get information twice a week from me and my regular guests. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? When is enough enough? We've all got different ideas about that. And I believe once you get to a particular level, it's one's responsibility to help others up the ladder as well. Now, that's part of the reason I share all this great information on my podcast, but it's also one of the reasons that on August 26th in Brisbane, Metropol's holding our charity ball. Pam, my wife's organising this with the team at Metropol, and we're supporting Hummingbird House in Brisbane. If you live in Queensland, and I know some people are coming interstate, but I'll leave a link in the show notes. If you live in Queensland, we'd love you to join us at Metropol's Masquerade Charity Ball on the 26th of August. And as I said, your participation will help Hummingbird House because they provide relief and support for children and their families through difficult times in their life. We went out and visited Hummingbird House. It's hard to imagine what it'd be like to learn that your child's got a life-threatening illness, that your child requires 24-hour-a-day constant care. It's far more difficult than you can imagine. It's a challenge no family should ever face alone. So you can help these children and their families by joining us on Saturday, 26th of August at the Grand Chancellor Hotel. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but go to charity-ball.com, charity-ball.com. and join us and help us make it a special fun night for you and me. You'll have a great chance to get in contact with all our team, but also help this wonderful charity. So I believe it's important to become wealthy because it gives us the ability to pass on information. And this is a great time to become wealthy in property as well. Look, I know there's negative messages, but just look back year after year. There's always been negative messages in the media. And despite all that, our property markets keep moving up. The long-term trend is up. Now, last year alone, 500,000 people came to Australia. It's going to be more than that in the financial year just gone, but in 2022, there were 500,000 people, and they're not bringing houses with them. And they're helping underpin our economy. They're easing some of the tight jobs market, but the sheer weight of numbers is going to offset any of the negative impact of the rising interest rates. These migrants, they've got to set up new households. That's driving demand. It's fueling our economy. We're not bringing in refugees. Many of these migrants are students, sure, and their parents are paying their way. We've got a lot of new cashed-up permanent residents who tend to rent for some time. They've got to still set up households, so they're spending making the wheels of the economy go round, and they're not feeling the pain of higher interest rates. So their sheer numbers are going to keep pushing up our housing market. It means rents are going to keep rising, property prices are going to keep rising as the supply and demand equation tightens further. But certain properties, certain locations are going to do well. We're getting into a period where the markets are very fragmented. But an opportunity like this to get set at the beginning of a new property cycle doesn't happen often. Now, I'm not advocating trying to time the cycle. I guess that's what most of us would like to do if we could take advantage of it. So how long are you prepared to wait to get set? Why not contact our team at Metropole and have an obligation-free clarity consultation with one of our property strategists to discuss your goals, to discuss your options. Now, we don't sell property. We're going to help you safely create intergenerational wealth through property. We can help you through our buyer's agency services, through renovations, development, property management, wealth advisory, business advisory, financial planning. We've got a number of ways of helping make sure that you create the wealth you deserve. metropole.com.au.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset message, I'd like to share with you a daily tool that the rich use, the successful people use, that never occurs to most people. You see, over the years I've worked with and mentored many successful investors, many successful business people. I've built a successful business myself, and I've found that these other people I deal with, they use a daily tool that doesn't occur to most people. Now, I'm sure you've heard about to-do lists. The best to-do lists incorporate daily activities that help you move towards the life goals that you're wanting to accomplish. I use an electronic one. I use a program called Trello that's on my phone and my iPad and on my computer. But I've found that to-do lists alone are not going to make you successful or ultra successful. While it's important to get things done, it's equally important to avoid doing things that are going to wash out all the benefits of a to-do list good habit. Now, you've probably never heard of to-don't lists before. I discovered this little known secret years ago, and it's been a major part in my success. A to-don't list is a daily list that includes things you should never do because they're either time wasters, bad habits, poor habits, or things that hold you back from having a successful life. And as you've heard me say in the past, we're all driving around with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake. We're doing good things that are getting us to where we want to go, but the foot on the brake is actually holding you back. So to-don't lists are just as important as to-do lists. Now, most successful people fostered accomplishments in their lives by diligently doing certain things every day, but they also did it by diligently avoiding certain things. Unfortunately, most people aren't as successful in their life as they'd like to be. They eke out a living, they struggle to get by. They're unaware, though, that they're engaging in destructive activities on a daily basis that makes the success that they're looking for impossible. They're engaging in habits that might appear on a typical to-don't list. Things like, don't watch more than an hour or two of TV every day. Don't waste time on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Don't envy other people. Don't make impulse purchases today. Don't gossip today. Don't gamble today. Don't drink in excess today. Don't lose your temper today. Don't ignore your family today. These are all the things that should be on your to-don't list. Don't read negative news articles today. Don't procrastinate today. Don't ridicule anybody today. Don't hate anyone today. Don't smoke a cigarette. And don't be negative. Don't be pessimistic today. Now, for those who have a lot of bad habits, to-don't lists are actually even more important than to-do lists for them. To-don't lists keep you aware of things you shouldn't be doing. Knowing what not to do is just as important in achieving success as knowing what to do. So my mindset message to you today is, what would be on your to-don't list? When you ask yourself that question, only then will you become aware of the daily habits that are constantly pulling you backwards. To-dos, while a great tool, are going to help you improve your chance for success, but they're only going to get you halfway there. To-don'ts, to-don't lists are going to take you the rest of the way. Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole?